get through this.
Easy for listening and it's able to do it.
Easy for dancing. I'm not a great lover of hemp.
That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are. Not me.
That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Shadowboxing. Have your say. Today my guest is Brian Gage at WTV Studios. Brian is a hemp warrior of WA, one of them anyway. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Tibor. Glad to be here.
When I was listening first of your story, I thought I will, get high on hemp, or at the hemp story. But what's happened after was I get stoned. So I don't know which one is better, but you tell the audience your story, and we will see if they're getting high or they're getting stoned from your story.
No, not from our story. Our story, the hemp is tested. It could only, in Western Australia, read a THC level of 0.35. So
it's useless.
Useless if that's what you're hoping to get out of it. But there's a lot of
but
other
the
uses.
story is not useless. Your story is not useless.
No.
Before we get into the story, we should tell something about hemp for the audience. As we know, it's hemp is known and used by the societies, different ones. Thousands of years, 10,000 years ago they used it, and that was one of the first cultivated crops domesticated in China. And it's a very useful one, as I heard. What sort of things they made from it, or used to make from hemp, as an industry on hemp?
Paper, clothes, food are some of the main ones that were used in the early years, but now there's over 20,000 different products that have been made out of hemp, and the numbers keeps going up.
So that's a big industry.
Very big.
And but it wasn't always the case. It's grown up nicely, and then come to a crash in the United States of America.
Yeah,
There's lots of things coming to the crash in the United States, not just on the financial markets, but everywhere and all over. However, hemp was favored by the United States as an industrial hemp since the beginning, as they got it from different countries. And as I remember, at least 4 or 5 of the United States of the presidents made their fortunes or part of their fortunes from industrial hemp. Started with George Washington.
Correct.
And so on. And the latest one from the 20th century was Mr. Ford, who tested hemp on the car because he wanted to.
No, this is Henry Ford, not
Ford.
President Ford.
Not President Ford, no, I know. It's Henry Ford, the car builder, yes.
Yeah, he did quite a well job of showing how it could weigh less and be stronger. So that was knocked back when the laws changed back then in 1936 in the US, and it changed things worldwide pretty much too.
So to make it sure the audience understand us, so Henry Ford tried to build cars using hemp. He built a car and he tested with a huge sledgehammer.
Yeah, and found out that it just bounces off and off you go.
So if hemp is that good for the society, apart from some smokers, why hemp is just, as an industrial hemp, disappeared in 1936? What do you think what was one of the main cause of that? I know they introduced a new law, but they banned practically all hemp production in the United States.
It was mainly big businesses that didn't want to compete against it is mostly the reason we see it as. We had a person that had a paper, 55 different newspaper outlets, and he bought big pine plantations in Canada and Northern America and didn't want to compete against hemp paper. And
he was accidentally the chief treasurer of the United States of America.
That was Gulf Oil. They also didn't want to compete against the oil that you could press out of the seed that can run the car too. So there was, and nylon had just came in with DuPont. So there were some people that had these new products and didn't like the idea that they'd have to compete against the plant that produces all those products.
But hemp doesn't produce nylon. or the stockings.
The strongest plant textile in the world. That's what it produces, that's what
very
it would
true.
be competing against. But that all ended, and it's taken a long time to build it up. You know, again, yes.
But it's accidentally in the United States, despite of the 1936, ban on hemp, all hemp product, not just the smoking ones. That's reversed a little bit in the Second World War, when the United States of America realized that how much they have to rely on some natural source of fabric, and they said, make hemp to win the war.
Well, they were cut off from the islands that supplied it, the Philippines and other places, because of the war. So they needed another place to get it from, and figured out that they could grow it themselves like
because
they used
to. Yeah, and in Virginia, that was the main place for growing for the Second World War, the hemp for the American Army. And surprise, surprise, they made their uniforms from hemp.
Yeah, parachutes, shoelaces, they picked a few stuff. And then with what they didn't use, they produced electricity, which powered the plant and sold electricity back to the scheme.
Yeah,
so they used it in a few different ways.
Well, the most sort of remarkable of the industrial hemp use in the history of the world, for me anyway, it's that Columbus, who discovered in modern time, discovered Americas, all his ships equipped from hemp product, all the ropes and the sails, hemp. And if we not have that hemp, industrial hemp in the Columbus's time, no discovery of America.
Well,
very ironic. What's the situation today in the 21st century with industrial hemp in Australia?
In Australia, it's governed by each state. Each state has their own rules for growing industrial hemp, and
which one is the most advanced state?
Well, I'd have to say Western Australia, only because of the legislation we were able to help push through that allowed us to export the seed products that we weren't able to process and use here. We're not allowed to sell hemp food as a product here.
Why is that?
Well, that's a good reason. We've been asking since 1999 why we can't have it as a food, because New Zealand and ourselves are the only two World Trade Organization countries that don't allow it as a food. And we really haven't heard a good reason of why it isn't a food. Every country that grows it for seed, for food, and that's how they start their industries, and they've made it very hard here in Australia.
But we can have GM food.
Well,
because this coming from the United States, without any labeling, of course, guys, so you don't know if you got the GM food, but we couldn't have hemp food.
Well,
that's ironic, is it?
Yeah.
What do you think, what's happening in the parliament,
well,
in Canberra or in the WA parliament, about this issue of the hemp food? They're smoking too much of the joints, so they couldn't realize how important is the food for people, or what?
I can't say for sure.
You couldn't say they're smoking too much?
No, I couldn't, and I'm not going to. But I will say that their reasoning and the police's reasoning cannot be proven anywhere else this is happening around the world. Nobody's having issues with people trying to sneak marijuana into hemp crops. It just can't happen. And the reasoning for not allowing it, it's got omega-3, omega-6, omega-9, all the amino acids. It's got all this good stuff for us.
Yeah, I know that. So people may not buying that many tablets and food supplies, from the chemist shops, or what?
Hopefully,
that's tragical. That's tragical. In the 21st century, that many idiots sitting in the parliament who don't considering, what we can do with hemp as an industry. And now we are talking about innovative nations, and we got a prime minister for that.
I'm looking forward to that. We've got lots of ways hemp can fit into those categories, but food
it's one of the most obvious one.
It is, and it has been everywhere. It's started up as an industry in Canada, in Europe. All these places were growing mainly for seed, and nowadays it's millions of dollars, $50 million in 2012 for Canada, because they could sell it to the U.S. So we should be building. We have Asia next to us, and we could turn it into so many different food products. Any product that a soybean could be made into, well, hemp is one of the better rotational crops. In Canada, where they've been growing since '98, they've shown that when they follow on a hemp crop, that they can get close to 10% better crop returns from wheat or canola or whatever they're growing afterwards, because the sun leaves drop off and the roots break up the soil, and it all promotes better growth for the follow-on crop that follows it. And hemp's been that way since the start. It used to be used for weed suppression. So, a couple seasons of hemp and the weeds are all gone because they take the light and the nutrients and make it hard for a weed to survive while you're getting a cash crop.
But that's not good for Monsanto.
Oh dear, sorry.
Or other big American multinationals who want to rule the world anyway.
We've done trials here. We don't use pesticides. We don't use insecticides. We use less fertilizer than most crops, and have got 3-meter plants, 2.5, 3-meter plants.
That's dangerous, man.
Well,
for the industry of like Monsanto, which is cries to give everything good for the world and save the world and produce as much food as you can and more. So Brian, we got the registration change in WA.
Yep.
The hemp industry, or the industrial hemp, except the food, be free to flourish. So one of your company, or the company being connected, been established soon after that, and you wanted to start up. What was the name of the company?
Hemp Resources Limited.
Yes.
And they had a lot to do with the legislation being passed. We have emails from the Department of Agriculture asking for our suggestions to what would be best for Western Australia to get the right laws through to make it an industry here. And that's what we were able to do, is put in where we're able to manufacture products here in Western Australia that might not be for sale in Australia, but can then be exported as long as we were manufacturing for exporting. So that's what was going to help us with the food. The paper, we needed 20,000 hectares planted out. We had Mora in 2004, interested in being the first paper mill, the totally chlorine-free paper mill.
Yes.
And from that, we had to wait 1.5 years for an industrial hemp license to get going.
What was the reason you not get it for 1.5 years?
I have to say there were reasons, but he could have given us the license and we could have sorted everything out as the industry got going.
Conditional, condition, yes.
Working with us, and we found that wasn't the case at all.
Okay, Brian, we have to stop now for a little while, going for a short break, but stay with us because the story is just coming up on the industrial hemp, or a saga in WA of the industrial hemp growing. Hello and welcome back to Shadowboxing, Have Your Say. And our guest today is Brian Gage, who is one of WA's hemp warrior. Brian, now we get to the story. You got the license, you got a company, you got some experience in China after the conference. So what's happened with that company who got the license in WA? I think that was the first license. That was the first licensed company in WA?
Yes, I believe it was.
Yes.
Even though we were the number 6 license, I think the first 5 were employees of the Department of Agriculture that wanted to do trials with industrial hemp.
And where these trials been held?
I would assume their Bentley facility. I'm not sure. They didn't give us much information on what they were doing, but...
So you are the first private company got the hemp license, industrial hemp license.
In WA.
In WA.
Yep.
Okay, so tell us the story. What's happened after?
So we did get a license, and from that time it was still a bit...
What was the year?
February of 2006 we were given the license.
So tell us what's happened.
So we have a big meeting in 2006 with all the shareholders, the directors from China, all coming to a meeting at our offices.
And that was an West Australian owned company?
Yes, it was.
Not a Chinese company?
No. But a Chinese had shares in it. We took in their technology and gave them shares for the right to take this paper process around the world. And that's how we
Okay.
were connected up with our
Oh,
Chinese.
okay.
There was no free
No.
trade agreements. There, you know, this was all done through us working with this Chinese company pretty much.
Sure.
So
okay.
everything sounding good. We'd had, instead of Mora, we were looking at Darken for possibly planting and putting a paper mill in, because so many people had changed in Mora from the time it took for us to get a license to when it actually could start happening. And once again, the Register of Industrial Hemp has a meeting in August of 2006 stating that if hemp resources is over the THC level of 0.35, that he'll refer this matter to the police. And around the world, everybody's getting numbers that vary a bit, not more than 1%, say,
Yes.
but vary. And so he's telling us that, you know, that's how he sees it with us. And we find out a few months later that they'd done trials earlier that same year and had 0.9. And the police weren't informed that they were 3 times over the THC limit.
The government.
The government,
trial,
the Department
yes.
of Agriculture had done these trials. So, you know, it wasn't a
And
level playing field.
they not reported themselves.
I don't think so. I sure wouldn't. It would have made news if they had.
So the message been sent to you guys: if you are crossing the limit, then you're gonna be reported to the police.
And that got stepped back because of the Minister Kim Chance when he found out about it. He was always pretty good helping getting the act in and
Yes.
pushing the industry, but it took a while. But in 2007, the CEO, Kim Hoff of Hemp Resources Limited, met up with Yunnan Industrial Hemp Company, and they have a seed strain that's considered a Chinese national treasure. They spent 68 million yuan on it back in 2004,
Yeah.
and were producing it to sell it to the world, and they wanted us as partners. So this register had the memorandum of understanding that was signed in December 2007
Yeah.
sent to him, and we got seed in March, April, and planted up at the Ord River irrigation area
Up north.
Up north.
Yeah, Kimberley's.
Yep, with just under 100 acres of hemp, and had really good results. But as this was going on, an ex-employee took a trip up to China and brought back 20 kilos of our group's seed stock, Yunnan Industrial Hemp seed stock, which they knew nothing about. And so we
So
started.
who was that person?
Donald Koo. He is
So Donald popped into the plane,
Well-
ex-employee of your company,
Yep.
popped into the plane, went to China, paid some guy some money and get the seed what you was just getting it before and
Yeah.
planting it. And you got
Well,
a
we-
monopoly on it, I believe, so it was exclusive to your company?
Yeah, we had the rights for Australia and New Zealand. That's
Yes.
what we had the rights
So
for.
he bought it here, we don't know how, but he flew out and flew back and he got the 2 kilos of hemp seed.
20 kilos.
20 kilos of hemp seed,
But
yeah.
we had imported 1.2 tons for our
Yeah.
trial. So, I mean, there was a little bit of difference on the amount and how we were connected in, which was never shown with Donald particularly, but
We got this guy going to China,
yes.
bringing back 20 kilos of seed, giving to the Department of Agriculture.
Using part of that at the
using part of
department.
that.
Yep.
And what's happened with the other part?
Well, we'd like to know that story too, but it hasn't been told to us. So
So what's the catch in it? So
The catch-
I going to the China, I buy this hemp seed and bring it back.
well, first you got to put it in when you're coming back into Australia.
If you got any
the-
seeds or food.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know that most people have to fill that
Declaration,
out.
yes.
And I've got 2 Freedom of Information searches in these files
Yes.
stating that there is no documentation.
So this guy never bought any seeds into Australia.
Well, see, that's pretty hard when it's growing in Australia to think that he didn't bring it in. I don't know. You tell me, huh?
So, okay, so he bought in 20 kilos, spread with the government. You got some kilos and I keep some kilos and we're all growing. And so what was the effect of that act? And
Well, we had a declaration on the 22nd of August in 2008 from Yunnan Industrial Hemp saying they've only dealt with Hemp Resources Limited, and that's their partners. And that didn't seem to be enough for the government, especially Department of Agriculture. They thought it was a civil matter. And then the registrar, Mr. Mark Holland, contacted Donald because he wasn't sure what the story was with the declaration. Then he writes a letter to Yunnan questioning them about where things were at.
Yeah, that's
so
their
there's second declaration in the 14th of November 2008 specifically states that there's no Donald Koo, there's no Dharmic Propriety Limited in their books. They've had nothing to do with this guy, and they only deal with Hemp Resources Limited. So, as the registrar, if you go to the Industrial Hemp Act and look at Section 41, it suggests that that becomes the police commissioner's investigation.
Task to sort out.
Yeah, when it comes to criminal matters.
But it only became a criminal sort of investigation if someone referring to them.
That's right.
You have to report it somehow.
Yeah.
And who has reported it to the police? The Minister for Agriculture?
No.
Redman?
No, or Mark Holland.
The Commissioner?
No, it was...
So who made the reporting? Why didn't they, first of all, why didn't they report it?
I think we're going to have to ask them because I couldn't figure it out either.
But it's fact of life, they did not report it.
But they didn't send any documentation, they didn't send the invoice or anything that Donald Koo supplied to Yunnan to verify it. So it took a year from that November to do a Freedom of Information search that brought up this invoice that Donald used so that Yunnan could see it. So in 2009...
And what was on the invoice? There is the invoice.
The invoice, yeah, the invoice is right there. And
the copy of the invoice anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, so what this invoice says?
It says that there's no manager in charge signature and there's no company seal on it. It's not a legal document in China.
Okay.
Period. That's what they state, and they say it's a fraud. So in November of 2009...
So next to this fraud invoice, we got the right invoice, which is the real invoice.
Yes, that we used in the...
That's the void invoice, which is not legal. Fraudulent. And this one is the legal one.
Yeah, with a manager in charge signature at the bottom there, Nelson.
Okay, so that's what you need when you purchasing seed from them. And that's when you bring it into the country, that's what you have to present.
So there's their company seal on their letter stating that that was a fraudulent invoice. And there's an independent translator that translated it, explaining
into English,
into English, stating that it was a fraud. So at this time, the Minister, Terry Redmond, needed to refer this matter to the police.
When he got the evidence from the company, which says that invoice, what this guy was using, is not our invoice, it's void, it's not legal, and the minister should recognize, because of his duty, okay, if this is the case, we have to refer that one into the police. Full stop. He did not.
That's a Public Service Act, and it didn't happen. No.
Ministers have to follow Public Services Act. Ministers have to follow.
Obviously, they don't, or he would have done it.
But I'm asking, ministers have to follow that bloody Public Service Act, or they can jump over it.
They have ways to deal with certain things. It seems. I'm not sure. I've gone through quite a different array of trying to find out.
The minister didn't refer to that thing as a fraudulent.
The Register of Industrial Hemp didn't
refer to the thing to the police. So what's happened? Who referred?
CEO Kim Hoff
of the company.
Of the company started sending.
What's the name again?
Hemp Resources.
Hemp Resources. Yes.
Started sending documentation to a Detective Sergeant Stuart Murphin and
into the fraud department, major
fraud squad, and after months of getting documentation, he took it to the bosses, and they suggested that it was time that this matter get investigated. He went to the Department of Agriculture to ask them to refer it because they thought it warranted a criminal investigation, and they wouldn't refer it.
Okay, what was the consequence of that fraudulent action of Donald's?
Well, that ended up with our company actually ending up in liquidation
In
after many
liquidation.
years, trying to fight for this. And
Fight for the exclusivity for Australia, New Zealand, which been destroyed by this Donald's Act, and that's it. So, what's happening now?
now we're
What do you guys want to do, or what they are doing
We're,
these days?
we're still talking, our hemp group, the company here, Synergy to Hemp now in Western Australia is talking to Yunnan Hemp. They're looking at signing another memorandum of understanding to bring Yuma hemp seed strains here. And then we're,
Again, exclusively
yes,
for Australia, New Zealand,
and then
yes?
we're branding this for the world because it's
From here,
from here.
from WA.
Yeah, so this is going to make work for West Australians. It's going to give farmers a set price on a crop that doesn't matter what.
Guaranteed price.
Yeah, with a crop insurance and a few other things that all add up to a really good story for WA if we get a level playing field, which we haven't had now for an awful long time.
So, you see the future of the industrial hemp industry in the world or in WA?
In both.
In both.
You know, we need to become more sustainable. My focus on this for so many years is because I see this being a very good step for our planet, making it more sustainable. And if I can help to make that happen, then I think I've done something pretty good. So
In your life.
Yeah, in my life. So this
And
is
definitely that will be a happy story, a happy ending story if
for lots of people, not
for
just,
lots of people,
Yeah.
especially if the government realizes how important it is to have hemp as a food as well.
Yes, that would be a nice bonus.
Which is the whole world realize that, except
Yeah.
Australia and New Zealand. So guys, wake up, please. Okay, that's where we got Brian, and I hope the audience like your story and learned a little bit more about industrial hemp and the need and the usefulness of that for our society and
Yep.
the future and the present. And Brian Gage, thank you very much.
Thanks,
and good
Igor.
luck for your fight.
Yeah, we'll need it.
See you next week, same time, same channel. Shadowboxing, have your say.